For joining us. I hope my sick boy on the couch here in Ohio is feeling better tonight. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 18. First, we're going to talk a little bit about this land promise and revelation and tribulation and all of that, and then go from there. So, in case I forget, we're going to be running out of those things. I didn't think we would. In case I forget, I'd like to have everybody that is capable of moving tables and chairs help us after the service is over, set up for the funeral dinner on Saturday. So let's have a word of prayer and we'll jump right in. Father God, we're thankful this evening that we can come into your house. We're so grateful for your word and for its preservation through the years. We're thankful, too, for minds and a time that allows us to see things in perspective. Tonight I pray as we look into your word that your Holy Spirit would be given permission to speak to us in a way that makes your word not just come alive, but make it understandable. In Jesus' name, amen. We got started on this subject that I alluded to on Sunday from this land promise that we found in Genesis 18, where God promised Abraham that he would have this land, it would always be his. And we discovered that the word always or forever doesn't mean always or forever. It has a limit to it. And we looked at the different examples, the Passover feast, the offerings, the high priest, And what God was talking about was, Abraham, the promise that you're going to have this land is going to last until your purpose is completed, and your purpose is to have the Messiah come through your loins. Once the Messiah is born, promises have all been fulfilled. And the promise of the land was fulfilled in Joshua's time, and it was a conditional promise. You get to keep the land as long as you're nice, and if you get naughty, I'm going to take it away from you, just like I took it away from the Canaanites. So that's what happened. Now, the people who believe that this land promise is forever and that Israel is still the chosen people of God, they fall under a group that is known as premillennial dispensationalists. It's got nothing to do with our salvation, not a thing. The problem with premillennial dispensationalists, though, is they actually believe that the church was a mistake. That in God's overall planning, he intended for the Messiah to come through Abraham, and that the Jews would accept him, and that he would have a reign on this earth that would resemble that of David. But unbeknownst to God, they killed the Messiah. And that was a big whoops. And when they killed the Messiah, God had to say, wow, I didn't see that coming. And so he had to come up with Plan B. Plan B was called the church. Now, the problem with that philosophy is that God was planning for the church before the foundation of the world. Before he set that first star in place or said, let there be light, he had planned for the church. Before he ever created this earth, he planned for the death, burial, and resurrection of his son, and said that before the foundation of this world, his son would buy the church with his blood. So if we start talking about the church was a mistake, that gets pretty close to calling God a liar or dumb or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. when we get to Revelation and we start looking at this stuff, I got you a one sheet called The Fascinating Secret Meanings Behind Nursery Rhymes. It's amazing that we have these nursery rhymes that all of us learned when we were kids. Sometimes our parents taught us, sometimes we learned them in school. But nursery rhymes are older than the term nursery rhyme. Most nursery rhymes were in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. And and I want to give you a word of caution here. When we start trying to explain what these nursery rhymes were about, what's happened is, as the centuries have gone by, we look back at history and we think, well, maybe it was about somebody else. But for instance, Three Blind Mice was about persecution of Protestants by the Catholics during the reign of Queen Mary. She was called Bloody Mary for a reason. And there were three Protestants, there were three priests, because she was the Queen of England. And her nickname was Bloody Mary. She had a Protestant half-sister called Elizabeth. And there were three guys that she wanted to execute. And that's where the cut off their tails with a carving knife. They were usually blindfolded when they were executed, and there's where we get the three blind mice. The Baba Black Sheep, whoops, we'll go to page 2. Mary, Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden grow? She was taking these corpses and burying them in her backyard. And that was how her garden was growing. Every time she'd kill somebody and put them there. And silver bells were really thumb screws. And cockle shells. Are we all of age here? I don't want to say something, because that was a torturing device that was connected to genitals. And you see, in these days with these nursery rhymes, they were making political statements about the government, but they didn't want anybody to know that they were making these political statements about the government, because if they would have found out that you were making a statement about the political government, Bloody Mary would have found you and you'd have had cockle shells or silver bells, or you'd have been making her garden grow. So they used these nursery rhymes to make statements, and the people who lived in this era, little Jack Horner, the abbot sent Thomas Horner to London with a Christmas pie that was supposed to be delivered to King Henry VIII. Inside that pie was these title deeds to property. And the poem says that on the way to see the king, Mr. Horner dug into one of those pies and pulled out a title, and that's how he got property. And but they couldn't prove it. But the poem went to tell how he got that, because it was pretty funny circumstances. So you see, they used terminology that only those who were in the know would understand, And the other thing that was so good for these people to use these nursery rhymes is most of those people were illiterate. They couldn't read, they couldn't write. But they could remember a catchy tune, a jingle. And most of the nursery rhymes had a little tune with them. A lot of them came from saloons, because everybody knows that you drink a little bit and you get creative. So they would make up these tunes, and then they could orally have this tradition where they'd pass on the history of what was going on in their country. It makes sense when we read that about nursery rhymes. What we have a hard time wrapping our heads around is, in the first century, as John is writing this letter of encouragement to Christians that were being persecuted, he writes in a way that talks about the victory that is going to come, but he uses imagery and symbols that Jewish Christians would understand, but Romans wouldn't. So when he's got these symbols in Revelation, dragon, serpent, Jews understood what that was about. But the Romans, who were involved in the persecution, they never caught on. And it was a simple method of relaying a message. In the same way, it was easier to tell a story using things like dragons and serpents and symbols for people who did not have the ability to read and write. So, last thing, tribulation. The last question we had last week, well, Bruce, what about the tribulation? Well, you can make the argument that the Great Tribulation of Matthew 24 refers to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. And the reason that I say that is because of what happened to those people. And on page 4 of that handout I gave you, the carnage is just unparalleled. When the Romans finally broke into the city, the sight of so many corpses shocked even the hardened soldiers. Josephus says 1,100,000 Jews were killed. Josephus says that there were so many Jews crucified by the Romans that they ran out of trees. There were so many Jews killed in that capture that they were putting out fires using the blood of the people. That's how much carnage there was. And then I go on and talk about the continuing oppression and the other emperors that persecuted them. So I'm missing the first page. Okay. Questions about that before we go on back into Genesis? didn't think so. One of the things to remember about Revelation, I know it seems like a very difficult book, but when you think that it is written in using symbolic figures, much like nursery rhymes, and then you know this about Revelation, it is not written chronologically. It is written in a cycle. So it has the history of the world and what's going to happen, and it is in a cycle. In each cycle that's completed, it has a different viewpoint. And when I preach from that book, I talk about 5, 6 levels. And every time you go up a level, you look at the same thing, but you see it differently. And in the old days, when I first came into Grand Rapids, and you could actually walk through the buildings, they had a stairway in St. Mary's where you could walk the stairs from the bottom floor where you walked in all the way to the 9th floor. And as you're walking up that stairway, there was panels of windows the entire way. Each floor you went to, you looked at the exact same parking lot and across the street. And every floor, it looked different. Same things, but from a different perspective. And finally, when you got to the 9th floor, you weren't looking straight out, you were looking straight down. And that's how Revelation is written, so that you see the same things happening in a cycle from different perspectives. And that makes it a lot less weird. Okay, Genesis chapter 18. Last week we left off with God changes the name of Abram and Sarai to what? Abraham and Sarah. And Abraham was still having a hard time understanding, but God said, no, Ishmael is not going to be your heir. The heir is going to come through Sarah. And 13 years after Ishmael was born, God comes and says, I'm going to make this covenant between you and your wife. But the first thing I need you to do is to get circumcised. And it says in verse 24 of chapter 17, Abram was 99 years old when he was circumcised. And all the men in his household, all the people that were under Abraham, they all got circumcised the same day. And so we go into chapter 18, verse 1. Ready, Norm? Read the first 8 verses, please.
The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting in the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed, and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." Very well, they answered, do as you say.
Okay. What? Keep going.
Oh, so Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 tenths of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran into the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to the servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and put them before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree.
Verse 2, when Abraham looks up, he sees what he believes are 3 men, only they're not. One is Jehovah God. It's what we call a theophany. We have an instance where we have the angel of the Lord, and that was Jesus before he was incarnated. He comes as a theophany, looks like a man, but he's really Jesus. This is God himself. And the 2 men with him aren't men, they're angels. And they're the 2 that are going to go down to Sodom in a little bit. Now, when they show up, Abraham had no idea who they were. He didn't know they were anybody special. But look at how he received them. In verses 6 and 7, what does he do that tells us the kind of man Abraham was?
He gets flour, he gets the finest calf. He orders a servant to go prepare it, which means he was probably rich.
He didn't say, your preacher, we named all our cows. And if we started them out as calves, we named them too. So Abraham didn't say, go get Molly, she's missing a leg anyways, and we'll serve her up. Now, get one of the finest calves we've got and prepare that. And see, they lived at a slower pace. Because if you were there and you were just stopped on your way and Abraham said, let me fix you a meal, you'd say, I really don't have time. I got to get going. Because it's going to take a while. You're going to bake bread. And I don't know if they had a fire going or they were just going to put it on rocks and let the sun bake it. But you got to kill the calf, you got to clean the calf, you got to cook the calf. And eating meat was not rare, not normal for Israelites, Jewish people. They don't eat much meat. So he fixes all of this. You know, when God tests us, if I say I'm going to test you to see if you can exhibit love under pressure, whether you can keep your temper when you're irritated, if you can be sweet when things are going wrong, you're likely going to pass with flying colors because you know that's what I'm going to shadow you and watch. God doesn't work that way. He catches us off guard. You're relaxing at home and the phone rings and suddenly you're confronted with a call for help. Can you come over? I need your help. We planned on relaxing. Kids are gone. Husband's gone. Just got the place to yourself. I've got to run to the hospital. Can you take care of my kids? What? You want me to do what? I have a neighbor like this. About a month ago, I was going to go to Meijer, and I had my glasses in a case, and I thought, I need to take care of that before I go. So I put my glasses in the case, and you know that that space you've got on your cars often where the windshield wipers go down into? It's just a little cover thing. I set my glasses right there, went and did what I was supposed to do, hopped in my truck, went to Meijer, and I thought, I wonder where my glasses are. Oh, no. So I called my neighbor. And she's not home much, but I saw her car just as I was leaving. She's a very busy gal. And I said, Becky, it's so dumb. I've lost my glasses. Could you see if they fell out along this? She walked from my house all the way out to Pine Island. And she didn't go far enough because I found them on Pine Island. I heard this noise, thump, 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 and I looked and the cars were running over my glasses. But you see, it's when we are not expecting to be inconvenienced that God tests us. And it's how we respond to that. Because He's watching. And these are the tests, and this is the way God tested Abraham. Now, He does such a great job with this. And of course, somebody else that was a partner of his came with flying colors to the test too. Because you know Abraham wasn't fixing this himself. There was a gal there that was making sure that it was served properly. And she was terrific. Now, let's look at verses 9. Renee, would you read verses 9 through 15?
Where is your wife Sarah? They asked him. There, in the tent, he said. Then the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my master is old, I will now have this pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh.
Here is the first hint given to Abraham of who these people are. What is it?
Yes, Sarah was.
Yeah. He said, where's Sarah? These were strangers. Not only did they ask the name of his wife, but that wasn't her name. She had been known for over 85 years as Sarai. God just changed it. He just changed it. And they said, hey, where's Sarah? Wouldn't you be impressed if first time you came in, I said, hey, where's James? And I had never met you too. You'd say, what? It is just something. How would he know that my wife's name is Sarah? And so that gets him thinking. Verse 11, and I know that God just tells things the way that they are. He doesn't sugarcoat. He doesn't, embellish. He just says it the way. But why did God have to put verse 11 in there?
Because it was a miracle about to happen.
Yes. Yes. I don't necessarily like that explanation, description. Yesterday I went to the eye doctor. Took me 3 weeks after my glasses were destroyed to get an appointment to get in to get my glasses. And I was having my eye exam. And first, the young gal that was, checking, you guys have all had eye exams, right? They make you look through those big glass things, and they make you read things on the wall and all. And she's the first one. She said, you're doing pretty good for as old as you are. She didn't have to say that. I know I'm old. Don't have to remind me. And then the doctor came in, and he looked at my eyes, and he said, no glaucoma, no macular degeneration. He said, and you don't even, it's in your notes that you are building up cataracts. He says, but I've not seen that. Your eyes are perfect, especially considering how old you are. God tells everybody, reminds us as we're reading this. 4,000 years ago, Abraham was old. Yeah, okay. And Sarah was old. Wow. And that was, as Renee said, because this was such a miracle. But there's a second reason why he included that Sarah was past childbearing. What do you think the second reason God included that for? And it's right there in verse 12.
Because she's doubting.
Yes. To help us as readers understand why she laughed. Understand why she laughed. Now, chapter 17, I believe it's chapter 17, when God says to Abraham, you're going to have a son through Sarah. He laughs, and God doesn't say a thing about it. Sarah laughs, and God corrects her. Do you think that there was a difference in their laugh? A difference in their mindset? You think Abraham was laughing for a different reason? Good one. That's a good one. It's going to happen to Sarah. That'll be funny.
Abraham might have been laughing excitedly. Whoa, this is going to happen, really?
Finally. Yeah, I've only waited 99 years. Yeah, that. I think that's a combination. But Sarah is a different laugh. It was only 13 years, well, really 14 years earlier that Abraham knew, and I get you 14 years, but he's 99. He was 80-some 14 years ago. So he knew what? He knew he could father a child. He did it with Hagar. See, it's not such a stretch. I had it 14 years ago. Sarah has been barren for 90 years. How is that going to work? How is that going to work? And yes, except who did? God did.
But then Abraham laughed out loud.
Yeah, Abraham, he laughed right out loud. Sarah laughed to herself, partly because she was eavesdropping. But, I mean, how could you expect much privacy when you're in a tent? You know? Those walls are really thin. You can't have much privacy in the tent. So she heard the conversation. She laughed to herself. And God said to Abraham, not only why did she laugh, what else did God include? Before that, look at verse 13. Yeah, God is talking to Abraham now, and he asks a question, and then he does what?
He asked Sarah.
He quotes Sarah, what she said to herself. I've told you the story before of Ben Alexander, a friend of mine that at one time in his youth was a spirit medium. He was a part of seances. He didn't know God. He was raised Jewish. He was used by Satan. They would bring ectoplasm right out of his body. It would hover over the table. And I've told a lot of you this story. And the demons could use that in a seance. And one of the fascinating things is it so happened that a catastrophic event took place at a seance to Ben's best friend, Jeff. And as Ben bent over, because he thought Jeff was having a heart attack, Ben had said to himself, I didn't sign up for this. I'm getting out. That night, he heard voices. He turned on his nightlight, and on the edge of his bed were two demons, and they were talking to each other. And remember this story? And Ben was rightfully scared out of his wits, and he said, what do you want? And they said, well, one of them said, we're here with a message. And Ben says, what's the message? And this comes right here, verse 13. Listen to me. The demon said, and Ben, as he's talking to the congregation, he stops and he says, no, I want to tell you, I did not say anything out loud. I only thought it in my head. The demon said, we're here with the message. And Ben said, what's the message? And the demon said, we heard you. Nobody leaves. And Ben said, I'm not leaving. And the demon said, we heard you. He quoted word for word what Ben thought in his head. And the thing that really freaked Ben out is he used Ben's voice to say it. You said you didn't sign up for this and you were leaving. In Ben's voice. Now, you might think that that's impossible for someone in the supernatural to do. And God just proved it in verse 13. Not even in the same room. And God says to Abraham, how come she laughed? She said, shall I indeed bear a child when I'm old? Our God's amazing. He can hear us when we're just thinking thoughts. And what? Well, I was at your house. I told that story, but that was years ago. You've probably forgotten.
I must have, because I pray in silence sometimes so the devil can't hear.
Well, you are a part of the family of God. So you're in a whole different realm. When Ben, in his bedroom, he wasn't a Christian, he didn't even know God. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. He didn't even know God. But the demons knew him. Because he was serving them and he didn't know that either. So then, after asking the question to Abraham, and you know, if she heard God, she didn't know it was God, but this man, say to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? And quoted what she thought, you know she heard God say to Abraham, is anything too difficult for the Lord? At this point next year, see, he's still not talking to Sarah. He's still talking to Abraham. And she's still listening. Only she's got her ear closer to that tent than ever before. At this time next year, Sarah will have a son. Now, verse 15, you've got to read between the lines because some time has elapsed. And Abraham why were you laughing? I wasn't. Yes, you were. Yes, you were. And she was afraid. So, that's it. God, he doesn't punish her. He doesn't reprimand her. He just says, hey, is there anything that's too hard for me? And then he goes on. So he's gonna take off. And let's read those. I'm sorry, I get ahead of myself. 16 through 21. Go.
When the men got up to leave, they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know.
Some things we even how it's written, we're just still not sure. I believe, personally, that 17 through 19, God is communicating with these two angels without verbal communication. He doesn't need to talk for them to know what he's saying. He can put his words into their minds because he's God and there is angels. Because, see, Abraham is walking along with them. And it doesn't say that he starts talking until verse 20. Now, it does say that the Lord said, but I don't think you would ask that question with Abraham there. Excuse me, I'm right here. Have you ever had that feeling? People are talking about you and you're right there. So, hey fellas, you think we should hide this from Abraham? Hello? Hide what? So I think that they're communicating here. In verse 19 is one of the most important verses in the Bible because, remember, weeks ago now, I asked the question, why do you think God chose Abraham? Here we've got the answer, verse 19. God has the ability, with his foreknowledge, not only to look into the heart of a human being like you and me, but he also can look down the corridor of time and see what's going to happen. The reason he chose Abraham is because he knew that Abraham had the personality that when he imparted this wisdom into his children, they, not perfectly, but they would carry that through for generations. Do you realize that the Hebrews and Jews today is the longest continuous religion in the world? Now, they haven't been always faithful, but they've never, ever stopped believing in God. Other civilizations have come and gone. Egyptians, they're not the same people. Their bloodlines are so messed up. Muslims, no. Back and forth, they don't even know what they believe. Greeks, gone. Assyrians, gone. Romans, gone. Hittites, gone. Persians, gone. Jews, the same Jews still here. 4,000 years. God picked Abraham because he knew when he imparted this into his family, they would hold on to that forever. Not perfect, not complete, lots of flaws. But God knew that. They weren't going to lose track of this. So, in verse 20 and verse 21, what is odd when we think about God? What's odd about verses 20 and 21? This is an anthropomorphism. We're putting a human tendency on a divine being, but God says something there that is odd.
check it out to see if the rumors are true.
Yeah, he's going to go down and check it out. Are you kidding me? He doesn't need to do that. He knows. So what does that tell us about God?
He's personal. He's personal.
He's personal. He cares so much about human beings that he gives us every possible chance there is. He's not just going by hearsay. It wouldn't be hearsay with God, would it? Has it ever occurred to you that things never occur to God? Because he already knows. So he goes down. He says, I'm going to go down and check this out. And God's not the one that goes down. Now, somewhere along the line, Abraham's figured it out. And we're going to figure that out when we read this next scripture. Want to read, Joe? Okay. 22 through 25.
The men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. And Abraham approached him and said, Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you, will not the judge of all the earth too right? Lord said, if I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake.
Okay, all right. And then Robin, read 27 through 33.
And Abram replied, Now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord, although I am but dust and ashes. Suppose the 50 righteous are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city because of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. He spoke to him yet again and said, Suppose 40 are found there. And he said, I will not do it on account of the 40. Then he said, Oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak. Suppose 30 are found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, Now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 20. Then he said, Oh, may the Lord not be angry, and shall I speak only this once? Suppose 10 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 10. As soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place.
Now, the first thing, obviously, in this exchange is, does Abraham know who he's talking to? Isn't that something? He knows he's talking to God. And I don't know if he's heard God before this, as God has called him and said, go here, do this, do that. But there he is, standing right there. And don't you just love that first part? God, I'm just dust. I mean, you could just touch me and I would disintegrate. I get it. What? Now think, and maybe not you personally, but you might know some people. If we would have been in Abraham's shoes, how might we have reacted when we found out what God's plan was? Well, a lot is there. A lot of panic. You know, there are people today that say things and I don't know that we mean them, but we say things. I wish God would just come and do something about these people, about this situation. Am I right? Yeah. Do you think that Abraham was unaware of what was going on down there? Absolutely not. He cared about Lot. He must have thought at times, good. Go down there, grab Lot, and level the place. But that's not what he did. He is going back and back and forth, back and forth. And how does he couch this back and forth? What do you call that, Amy, when you're going back and forth? What's that term, legal term?
Just negotiate.
Negotiate, yes. How does Abraham couch his language negotiating with God? What does he keep saying? Don't be angry. You're too good for this. You're too loving. You're not going to destroy this city, especially if there are 45? No. It was supposed there was just 40. No. It was supposed there was just 35. No. And he just keeps going. Oh, man. I want you to look at verse 33. Because some people said, why in the world did Abraham quit? Ran out of numbers. Oh, that's good. Ran out of numbers. No, he was only at 10. He still had one more. Yes, Renee, in verse 33, and I've missed this until I was studying for it this week. I've missed this for all of these years. I won't destroy it on account of the 10, and as soon as God finished speaking. It wasn't as soon as Abraham finished. Abraham might not have been done. But God was. Because he said, Abe, you've run out of numbers. As soon as he had finished speaking, he left. And Abraham returned to his place. Oh, gotta quit. Too close to the end. So, please, if you can, help set up for the dinner. We're going to put the round tables out, and we need 12 if there's 12 there. Shouldn't take us long. Thank you for that.